welcome to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast, where every week we talk to folks who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all of which take you one step closer to that feeling of hope. I'm your co-host, Neil Trivedi.
And I am your co-host, Renee O'Day.
And today we are so honored to have Dr. Malissa, is it Tigges, right? Tigges or Tigges?
Tigges.
I was way off. Okay. Sorry. Dr. Malissa Tigges, psychologist, and a whole lot of other credentials. And actually, let's start with that. So can you tell the audience a little bit about what exactly you do, your qualifications, and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you guys for having me. So excited to be here. My name is Dr. Malissa Tigges. I'm a licensed clinical and forensic psychologist. I have a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degree all in psychology. And when I was in graduate school, my concentration was in forensic psychology, which from your previous guest is just the interplay between psychology and the law. So what that means is if I'm doing evaluations or I'm providing even direct therapeutic services, it's almost always in the context of a referral that came from some of the court systems that we work with around here. I primarily work with the family court, but I do have some criminal court experience as well as with the dependency court. So that's what I do. I do evaluations, I do therapies, but I also have a charity-funded therapy site called Family Forensic Services that provides free therapy to families that are referred by the family court.
Oh, fabulous.
Okay.
And Neil, I'm going to say something here. You can cut out that part, but I'm going to tell the audience what this episode is about. Or do you have that written down?
No, I don't. So go for it.
Okay. So, can we just call you Melissa, or do you want to be called Dr. Beautiful?
You can call me Melissa casually. Thank you, Dr. Tigges. Interchangeable. We're not in front of any clients, but yes, I do I the clients to call me doctor.
Okay. So I watched a video that absolutely horrified me, where these daycare workers wore screen masks and scared the living bejeebies out of 2 and 3 year olds.
Yeah.
And I cried. I literally cried. And I told Neil, we have to find an amazing psychologist to come on and talk about this, because you can't just have anybody. You have to have somebody that knows children.
Qualified. Yeah.
And so here we are.
And just to give due credit, Dr. Lena Haji, who's a frequent guest on this podcast, recommended your name when Renee said, "Who's a good person in your circle? Surely you must have lots of people. Can you suggest somebody?" And she suggested your name, and and here we are.
Here we are.
I usually am the one that works more with the children. So whenever there's a request for someone who has more specialized experience with kids, I do those therapies and those evaluations, but it's with a lot of kids and their parents. So used to working with kids for sure.
Yeah. So as Renee explained about the video, I guess we could start with, I know you have a very strong react, but that's okay. This is unfiltered. It's for adult. You can say whatever you want. What was your initial reactions? I know you felt we all felt so strongly about it, but what did you specifically feel? And then we'll get into some of the questions about the psychological aspect of it.
Yes. So just to kind of paint the picture for your listeners and viewers, this is in a daycare facility in Mississippi, actually, if I remember.
Mississippi. Okay.
Why? Because some of the individuals that were involved in perpetrating this trauma on the children, they look very much to me like hillbillies. I was just very frustrated that these people, they're clearly just working there with children and maybe don't have that experience, working with kids before. But to paint the picture, it's like a happy daycare facility. The children's age ranges from about 2 to 3 years old. And they are seemingly sitting at their table doing table time and an activity, maybe a lunch or something. And approximately 4 adults are with the Scream a Halloween mask on, like from the movie Scream, the long ghost-like terrifying mask with the black cape on over it. And they are screaming at the children, chasing them around, physically manhandling the children, getting down in their face, screaming loudly. And for the most part, the images of the children's faces are protected. You know, they're blurred out to protect the confidentiality of the children. But
Absolutely.
what was notable when I watched the video was one pair of parents said, no, you're not going to blot our kid's face out because we want the audience to see the sheer level of terror that our daughter went through. And that was a very difficult moment to watch because she's, again, approximately 2-3 years old, just shaking uncontrollably, red faced, and just like completely open mouth screaming at the top of her little lungs. And they weren't able to get away from them either. They were there, you know, so even if they did get up and maneuver away, they were chased. So it was physically painful to watch that. And my brand of reaction most times to these things, when most people get really sad, mine is actually to get very angry. So this like induced a lot of rage in me. I do not think fondly of these individuals, and I don't really care to listen to any excuses, like if they had a childhood trauma that they did not overcome and that's why they're doing this. It's just unacceptable. Yeah. And I have kids of my own, and I was physically sick to my stomach, like to imagine that this could have happened to anybody. Yeah, absolutely. Some of the effects were already discussed in the news clip, which is that some of the children were already experiencing a lot of sleep disturbance and nightmares. So we were already seeing some of the effects of that trauma on the kids. And it was just a little frustrating because the adults that were responsible, they were arrested, but they were only fired, of course, by the daycare facility after this happened, and the daycare facility owner is claiming that they had no knowledge of this. But I feel that they are responsible. Yes, you hired these individuals.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The parents can get together and, you know, sue them all through the daycare center, and as they should. I mean, that's why we have a system here in America. You know, everybody has, you know, the right. And let's see them defend this. I would love to see them. I would love to go sit in that courtroom.
Oh, but truthfully, they need to sue also for punitive damages, because the effects of this incident are going to be long-standing for a lot of these kids. It would be a rare instance that they would have completely overcome that with no trauma, because it was just so impactful. And also, we don't know what those kids' predisposition for being traumatized by things that happen in their life was before that happened. So I do think that the parents have a good case here to sue, not just to get justice for their kids, but justice should include like punitive damages, because there's going to be long-term therapy that's required.
Absolutely.
And mental health issues.
Yeah. You mentioned like that there is certainly, and you're absolutely correct, no excuse whatsoever for their behavior, no matter what they went through or their personal, or if they have childhood trauma or whatever. But are there in your observance over the years, given what you do, are there specific traits or common traits that make these people, not saying it's an excuse, but I guess what I'm asking, what makes them do that? What triggers these people to actually think that doing something this horrendous is actually okay?
I mean, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall listening to them like come up with this plan. You know, there's a lot of idea out there that if you went through some trauma as a child, like hypothetically sexual abuse or something, that you're actually more at risk of offending on children and hurting them in the future. But that's actually really not shown in the science and the literature and the research. You know, it actually makes the children more vulnerable to being abused again, rather than them to grow up and become an abuser. Those previous, what we call adverse childhood experiences, the way that they cause physical health changes, they cause neurological brain changes. if these types of levels of stress are allowed to persist inside of a child's like underdeveloped body, that it can actually cause physical health problems in the future, because again, when their system was underdeveloped, they were put under a tremendous amount of stress without any way to relieve it. And if you have that much chronic stress in your life and there's no, caring adult there to help you soothe and to get through that, then that stress is going to have neurological changes, structural changes on the brain, which will later end up with this person having to deal with more mental health issues down the line, like depression, anxiety, physical health issues like heart issues, obesity and things like that, and more use of substances. So these types of things actually make more people vulnerable to being abused again, because it predisposes them to being a vulnerable person when these things happen to them, rather than them growing up and abusing someone else. I just worry that these kids are gonna, again, some of them are probably gonna be fine, but let's say that they had a predisposition for anxiety, or they were already traumatized by some previous incident, and then this thing happened, it's gonna make it that much more difficult for them to overcome and be resilient to that.
Can they start by, can you give therapy to a 2 and 3-year-old? Can you make them understand that, they can be helped,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a lot of therapies for the young ones is a play therapy, and kids are more relaxed in a play therapy environment. And it allows them to, use their imaginations to explore some of their feelings. And it helps them to articulate things that they can't really articulate with words because they haven't developed that verbal language yet. I mean, they can talk, but talking to be able to say, I am feeling this way because of this, this, and this. I would wager to say it's all there. They do have all of those same feelings that we do after a trauma. They just don't know how to articulate what it is they understand about the situation and how they're experiencing it, how they're coping with it. And so if you don't have like one really loving adult there to at least one to help them organize that information, then they just went through this very traumatic experience. It's going to be hard for them to overcome. But yes, with these young kids, the first thing is to just assure them that they're safe. And I know based on my own experiences with my own child who is around this age, that I would have to really explain to her that she wasn't responsible for that. Yeah, I would be explaining to a child, like, which is so devastating, honey, this was not your fault. This is the actions of adults that have serious problems. And you did not deserve to be treated that way, because these kids were probably even thinking like they did something wrong to elicit that was like a disciplinary measure, like they weren't being good. And kids are all about internalizing like those labels of good and bad at that time. So I really think that would be a big part of the work. And then you just have to be very patient, because not every child is going to respond in the same manner. Let's say there were even 2 siblings in that same classroom, and one of them thought it was a funny joke and the other one didn't. The reasons why a child would have a worse response to the same event as another are very unique to them personally. We just don't know what they have already been through in their lives. So being patient with them.
Should adults ever scare children?
What's the point? Now, if we're just being spooky and it's just a fun thing and it's like, no, don't worry. It's fun to be spooky or whatever. It's fun to go through a mild haunted house. That's fine. But I mean, if we could have hooked each of those children up to like a biofeedback machine, you would have seen their cortisol levels, the stress hormone, flood their system, which does have damages to it. You have too much of that stress hormone in your body, and it can really cause a lot of issues. Their blood pressure would have been off the charts. Their heart rate would have been off the charts. What was
that one little boy? Did you see the one little like blonde boy that the girl got in her face and she said, "Are you going to be good? I'm going to have to take you outside." Oh my God. I was thinking, this poor child, what is happening to him? And you just explained it.
I see those, like, do y'all see on Insta and TikTok and stuff, like some of those parents who will have like Pennywise the clown surprise their child at the Halloween photo shoot. And so the photos are really funny because he's sitting there on a pumpkin patch looking really happy. And then all of a sudden a scary clown comes out and the pictures are of the child like running and screaming away. A lot of people think that is very funny. And I don't
get it.
No.
I don't get it. Yeah. I don't get it.
Why are we, why do we want them to feel, even for a minute, that they're not safe or protected or that someone's trying to hurt them? Like, what is the point of that? Just for our laughs? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Know your kids. You can joke with them and you can be spooky with I'm spooky with my kids. I dressed as the other mother from Coraline for Halloween, and my daughter dressed as
Coraline. Cute.
You know?
Oh, how cute.
Went in a haunted house.
We used to do that.
Yeah, it was spooky. We love being spooky. We love Halloween, you know, all those good things. But but if I wanted to really scare her, I could go all into the character of other mother. And then she's looking at me like, are you my real mom? And I don't want her to question that. It's just not necessary. So yeah.
And I think part of that is also, right, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's part of that process. And if you're talking about being spooky and safe, it's also creating that letting them know, okay, it's Halloween. So Halloween, we do this. We decorate our houses this way. We can go but remember, it's not real. You won't really be hurt, right? You can also create that safe space in advance. So that way it doesn't, if they know, or they at least have an idea of, okay, this is what it's all about. They're not really trying to hurt me, or mommy's not really trying to scare me, you know, into some kind of traumatic state. It's all fun. It's for Halloween. Then I would imagine that would make a huge difference, just knowing about that in advance.
I mean, I will be honest, I saw Silence of the Lambs from a relatively young age, not like under the age of 7 or anything, but a relatively young age. It was very pivotal in my career because definitely wanted to get into forensic psychology after watching that. But my mom and my dad had gotten in the habit of exposing us to what is considered like adult, you know, maybe inappropriate for kids to see, like rated R movies and stuff like that, but they would watch them with us. And if we were feeling nervous, my mom would be like, that's ketchup, honey. Like, that's not real blood. That's ketchup. It's stage makeup. And so that allowed me to like dip my toe in the spooky world and enjoy being scared and fearful. And now I do. I love scary movies. I like haunted houses and all that stuff, roller coasters. But it was in a safe way. Yeah. If I were like, I want my daughter to like roller coasters. So, and preparing her for that, I'm just going to throw her on her first one, like before she's ready. And I haven't prepped her with that at all. She's never going to ride one of those things ever again. You know,
that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
I don't ride roller coasters and I don't watch scary movies because I had 3 older brothers that used to put me in a closet, you know, my sister and I, and put us in the closet and thought it was funny. And now I have claustrophobia.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny to
I was 5.
Yeah. It's funny to an extent until it impacts your life and you're like, I have claustrophobia, but it's hard now for me to get on this elevator. It's hard for me to be in an airplane now. Why? Because your brothers were teasing you. You know, it's just like, I love that question. Is it okay to scare your kid? Yeah. But like the way that we're presenting it is be there with them to explain that to them. That is you helping them to self-soothe. The reason why trauma has such a high incident rate of problems down the line is because in those experiences, when they are going through these physiological effects of being traumatized, they don't have the ability to self-soothe, and they don't have an adult there that's helping them to calm down and soothe. And what we're learning when that happens is to regulate our emotions. If we don't get that education on how to regulate our emotions when traumatic things happen, then our emotions are all over the place and it's really hard to get them to come down. And that kind of stress on your system over time is what causes those issues and those problems. So can you put your kids through a little bit of stress if you're there to help them kind of like come down from it? Yes. So for example, if you want to go on the roller coaster with your kid and you know they're going to be scared, but you build them up, and then afterwards you're like, see, that was fun. Let's take a few deep breaths. Like, let's organize this in our brains as this was like a fun adventure. It wasn't something terrifying. That is what helps that child to move forward and be like, oh, okay, I can have this kind of thrill and it's not scary or unsafe. And then they don't become traumatized by it. So
can they have, okay. When I was pregnant with all my children, I used to, put the earphones on my belly and have them listen to music and, talk to them and soothe my belly and stuff like that. And two of them came out with anxiety, and it's because it's in my family.
I will say that you're touching on something that I did want to talk about today, which is intergenerational trauma, and how this can have an effect, like with this school situation, with this daycare situation. Like I said, if two kids come out of that scenario and one of them seems pretty resilient and fine, maybe that is just simply because they didn't have intergenerational trauma or other predispositions for things because of their family history. So for example, you take your kids, Rini, and you put them in that situation. And yes, maybe they do have a predisposition from your family history for anxiety. That's going to be a lot more of an impactful situation on them than the other kid that maybe doesn't have that predisposition. The way that it works is basically like, if you take the trauma in and of itself and you have it like in its own bubble, there are contributing factors to that trauma that were in existence sometimes before the trauma even happened, such as your chemical makeup, your biology, like your neurotransmitters that are in your brain. And then because of that trauma and that predisposition, your inherent biology, then that's going to manifest in certain behaviors. And those behaviors can actually cause more trauma as well. Those behaviors are like risk of self-harm, addiction, attachment issues, liver disease, heart disease, cancer increases, and things like that. Because by the way, trauma causes physical health issues for sure. And so as an example, if you had like a child that was in that daycare video, and heaven forbid this was the case, but let's say that child did not have a secure attachment and bond to a primary caregiver, and maybe even grew up outside of their parents. Maybe they grew up in an institution where they didn't have a natural motherly love. Well, that child is going to grow up without a secure attachment and a bond to a caregiver. And therefore, they're already going to be at a disadvantage when they have kids someday, because how are they supposed to raise a child with a secure attachment if they themselves were never given that and they don't know what that is? So as the child grows up, they're struggling with depression because of these predispositions for things. And then as an adult, we'll have their own child. Well, now we're having a child while struggling with depression and a lack of support in the community. And so what could happen to that child? That child might end up in care. And then the cycle starts all over again. So nature versus nurture can create like sort of like a worst recipe ever for certain kids, unfortunately. And so that's why maybe one kid would have made it out of that situation, but the other one not very well. Empathy forms and compassion for others forms if you do have a secure attachment and bond. It's going to inevitably form. Because what is a secure attachment? It's a consistent, emotionally responsive caregiver. Not only are they emotionally responsive, but they're consistent with that child. So the child knows that when I express a need, this parent's always there, and it helps them grow up just well adjusted. If they do grow up well adjusted and they have that secure attachment and bond, they're going to be able to develop empathy for others. But yes, these teachers, not only did they traumatize those kids, but they set one of the worst examples for how people who are supposed to protect you and keep you safe and guide you and teach you are supposed to treat children. That's the example that those poor kids got. Like, this is the teacher. So what are they going to be faced with about, like, what's their conceptualization going to be of school now? Like, how are they supposed to go to school in the future?
Oh, Melissa, you just touched on something that I am passionate about. is when children start school, and it's Goldie Hawn that started this.
Mm-hmm.
She has it's called Mind Up.
Mm-hmm.
And what we do is we teach children yoga, breathing, how to self-calm.
They're just
goes a long way.
Yeah, they're trying to make the environment conducive to learning. Like these children are, that was such a scary incident, but now there's like the layers of betrayal of trust of adults. You know, again, like if you kind of think of it as, this might be a weird parallel that I'm drawing, but like when people are abused by their institutions or their churches, you know, like this is someone, you know, what is a view of a teacher? What's a teacher supposed to be to you? What is a clergy person supposed to be to you? If they're held to a light or a standard of, they're supposed to be someone to guide you, to care for you, to keep you safe when you're not with your parents, to teach you things that you didn't know before, to just make sure you're on the right direction so that you can have like a good life. And then that's the person that horrifically abuses you. It bastardizes your view of those people. Now for the rest of time, I'm not saying these kids can't get over it at some point and maybe form like trusting relationships with other teachers. And I hope they do so that they can try to heal from this. But they just learned that these adults who were, you know, given to us to protect us, this is how they treated us. So how are they supposed to feel about future teachers in school? If I could, I'm going to look at some of these stats to you. Have you discussed adverse childhood experiences, or have you guys heard of adverse childhood experiences or ACEs? ACEs?
I've heard the name, but not like so familiar with it as far as the details of it.
Yeah, basically they're just, they're an event that was traumatic that can be experienced by a child, evokes fear, it's commonly violent, dangerous, life-threatening, and they've done so many studies on these ACEs. They've identified what different adverse childhood experiences are like. So for example, obviously sexual abuse, mental health issues on the part of a parent can be a very traumatic situation, domestic violence, natural disasters like hurricanes. All of these things are considered traumatic events. They've done all these studies that the more of these ACEs that you have present in your life, statistically higher the risk that you're going to have serious problems down the line. And so if you have, for example, if you have like, what's the statistic here? 1 in 6 adults have experienced 4 or more types of ACEs in their life. And 5 out of 10 of the leading causes of death are associated with these experiences. And preventing them can reduce the number of adults with depression by as much as 44%. So the more you have, the greater number of adverse childhood experiences you have in your childhood, the more you are going to have a difficult path in life, a negative outcome in life. It's not a death sentence. It's something that hopefully you could be aware of and then intervene upon it with therapy or something. But yes, you're at risk now. You're at risk for learning issues, problems at school, mental health services, increased involvement with the child welfare system or even the justice system. You're getting arrested more, and you have longer term health problems like diabetes and heart disease. So this was just one ACE that these kids went through, and the school, or whatever we want to call them, the daycare, would not know if these kids have been through any other ACEs, and they just tacked another one on, thereby increasing their risk for a negative outcome in life. And that's why the parents really should be getting together for a class action lawsuit that includes punitive damages to pay for the therapy that their kids are going to have to go through.
We say that children do this because they're acting out they're acting out for attention or whatever, if they're not getting it in the manner that they should. Is it the same with like adults, like these people who did what they did and other people who do these kind of horrendous things? Is there this thing of in childhood, this thing I didn't get, so now do something that, you know, really gets them, no matter how notoriety, so to speak? Like, is that an element that ever plays into it?
I mean, I think that these people who did this definitely had some unmet unresolved emotional needs from childhood. Because again, if you're a baby and you don't have any control over your environment, but you cry and you have a mom there that comes and picks you up and she can tell that you need a diaper change and that you are hungry and your diaper is changed and you're given a bottle and you're fed and you're put to sleep and the world is right, you're going to grow up pretty well adjusted. If then, let's say in the alternative, which by the way, I know y'all are doing a podcast with Dr. Haji, who referred me to this one.
Yes.
Talking
Yes.
about serial killers and things like that. A lot of the research shows that people.
Wait. I got to make sure my window's locked.
Oh, yes. Careful. A lot of people who grow up with that pathology, especially like psychopathy, and I would say even Dahmer and some of those, if you look at their attachment bonds in early life, they did not have a secure attachment. What if, hypothetically, same scenario, baby's crying, needs a diaper change, needs to be fed, but the parent is experiencing severe postpartum depression and they want to be there, but they can't because they're so depressed that they're withdrawn and they're not able to be as emotionally responsive to their child. Then can that affect this child's, ability to form a secure attachment and a bond? Yes. Will it mean that they're going to grow up and be a serial killer? No. I would say what would make them grow up to be a serial killer is having no attachment and bond, and then being in an environment where it's modeled to be extremely violent towards a certain population. And that will be like the best recipe.
Yeah.
Starts first.
What would you say, this just popped in to the parents who have that postpartum and they want to, like you said, but maybe just psychologically they're not in that space where they can. What advice would you give to those parents?
Yeah, I would seek professional help. If your mental health is in a place that prevents you from being as emotionally responsive to your child as you can be. Granted, please let me just make a disclaimer, like everybody goes through sleepless nights. Yeah. We're not as quick to jump up and take care of the baby. Sometimes we're sleep training and, we are letting them cry for 3 minutes, even though it kills us because they've been crying all night or something. We're just trying to get them down. So I'm not blaming those parents. And in those isolated moments, parents should not be afraid. This is a more consistent thing. If you are consistently unable to meet the needs of your child, because of something you're going through, like maybe you're a widow or a widower and you're grieving, you don't have any family support, you're extremely financially strapped. I mean, these are all like very legitimate reasons why a parent might not be as emotionally responsive. That I would suggest get some professional help because it is too much at stake. You cannot affect a child's attachment style. It is imperative that they have a secure attachment. The other attachment styles are not healthy. This is the only healthy one. Now, can you still live a healthy, productive life if you have a different attachment style? Yes, but it will not be without its struggles, and it would be something that you would need to acknowledge. This is my attachment style, so this is what I'm doing to overcome it. But yeah, if you're not able to be there for your kids and you know that it's affecting your bond with them, maybe you're going through postpartum or something, I would get some professional help because that attachment is so critically important to the child's whole life. I'm still fiercely angry on behalf of all the parents. So, to those parents, if they hear this, please listen that your kids deserve long-term care and you deserve justice in the form of punitive damages, because this is going to be so much more than just like a few therapy sessions after it's over. It could have longer term effects than that. And then those people, I
have a feeling when those parents saw that video, it was right in their head that these people are going to pay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, absolutely.
I agree though. I really agree that, goodness, I'm glad that it was caught on video camera because that was not the first and it wouldn't have been the last. And I have concerns about their ability to control themselves. Like once they get into that frenzy of scaring people, you could see it. They were like all amped up on adrenaline. Like this was the most fun thing ever. And that's whenever you really start to lose control. That's when, they grab a kid, but they grab them too hard or they yank them and then something bad happens. It's like, that's why you don't play those games. So
where can people find you?
So I can be found
Yes.
on all socials. That's the easiest way, on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Dr. Malissa Tigges, spelled Malissa Tigges, all one word. And there's even a link tree on my Instagram page if you wanted to reach out to me for professional reasons like consulting or doing evaluations and things like that. I'm only licensed in the state of Florida right now. I'm in the process of getting licensed in other states, but there's a lot of states that you can provide services to certain states if you're in Florida, but not all, like New York, California, and stuff like that. So,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank
We'll
you.
be linking all of that in the description of this episode.
Yes.
So we'll provide all of your links. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
kiddo. We'll
All
talk
right.
to you soon. Okay?
Okay. All right.
Have a great day.